This is the fifth in a series of living history interviews that Potomac Chesapeake Association for College Admission Counseling is putting together in anticipation of our 50th anniversary of the association, which is now about 3.5 years away.
Okay.
And this morning we have a chance to hear from Pamela Fay-Williams, and I'm going to call her Pam Fay from here on out because that's how I first got to know her.
Right.
Who is one of the Potomac and Chesapeake leaders who's been involved both regionally and nationally in our association. And she's been away from Potomac and Chesapeake for a while, now she's back. So we're taking advantage of the opportunity to let her talk with us a little bit this morning. I want to start by asking Pam to talk a little bit about her pathway into the helping professions and more specifically into college counseling and how all that came about. Reflect on that for us.
Where do you want me to start?
You can begin wherever the story begins.
I think I'll start in high school.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Sure, that's great.
I went to high school in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and of course it was a DoD school, Department of Defense. It was the third, I was in the third graduating class. There were 19 in my class. There was no college counseling, obviously. And so I sort of took it into my own hands, which, I think in retrospect has its significance. And the only brochure I had was a brochure from the United Methodist Church, which my parents and I belonged to. And I chose Ohio Wesleyan. And I applied to Ohio Wesleyan, but there were maybe 12 colleges. And I applied and I was accepted and given a small scholarship. But in the meantime, my dad, who had been seeking a position with greater leadership possibilities, which moved us to Puerto Rico, and now was at the end of his term there, which was a 3-year assignment in those days, in the 50s, and post-World War II stuff. He had applied for a new position, and it was going to be in Virginia. And he said, well, that's very nice. He said much more kindly than this, but you're going to go to West Hampton College when you're going to live at home. And I said, I do not want to go to a women's college. And so I felt that the choice was taken away from me. And then now in jumping forward, and so I think that's really the catalyst for my interest in college counseling, because I didn't have a choice. I didn't feel I had a choice. I found out much later in life, in my dad's life, that he went to the University of Missouri, and the University of Missouri in Columbia, Stevens College, is very close to the University of Missouri. My dad always thought he wanted me to go to Stevens College, and he wanted me to have a women's education. So, you're right about this. And he figured out that, that at one point in his late 80s and dementia, he says to me, didn't you choose to go into college counseling because I told you where to go to school? And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm pretty sure that was it. Yeah. But I had no intention of going into college counseling. I majored in Spanish in college. I did go to West Hampton, and frankly, it was very good for me. It helped me develop myself as a woman and value what I could contribute as a woman. And I majored in Spanish. I loved history and political science, and those were my minors. And then I went into teaching Spanish. And then I taught Spanish for 5 years, got pregnant, had children, and it was during that period when I was home that I thought, you know what, I really think I would like to be a counselor because of being able to relate one-on-one with students. And then I was a member of St. Stephen's Episcopal Church, and a job opened up at St. Catherine's School, which is an Episcopal school right across the street, for college counseling.
That's where we met first, yeah.
Yes. And I thought, yeah, gee, you know. And one of my friends said, Pam, you really ought to apply for that job. And I still had daughters at home, and I was very wary about going back to work full time, but I was sick of staying home all day cleaning out after everybody. So I applied for this job, and I came in, you know, in retrospect, the head of the school told me why he hired me was I came in with all these ideas, you know. Well, do you have the colleges set up alphabetically? Do you have cards about them? You know what? You know, da 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 da. And I essentially had organized it before I even got to his office to ask him about it. So I got the job, and then
You did your homework.
well, I started thinking. You know, there was no homework in those days. That was in the early 70s,
Right.
before college counseling had really started. And so I started thinking, you know, what would I do to organize an office like that? And I really got into it. And then the school eventually got some pressure to have me properly educated. And so I went back and got a master's in education with there was no mention of college counseling in that degree. Tom Pollard gave a summer institute in college counseling, and I attended that, and that was invaluable. The only training I got until I got to PCACAC, which was, you know, I really awesome.
Well, that's really my next question.
Yeah.
How did you first get connected to Potomac and Chesapeake and via this state and regional chapter to the national organization? How'd that come about?
Well, the head of the school, when he hired me, said, you know, you're going to have to travel. And I want you to go to Potomac and Chesapeake meeting the spring meeting, and get, you know, just start, essentially he was saying networking and getting to know more about the profession. And I went and I thought, oh my gosh, I love these people. You know, I just felt so at home and so connected with everybody at Potomac and Chesapeake and Williamsburg in, must have been 73 or 74, spring conference.
Probably
And
been to Williamsburg more often than
right, yeah. And I loved it. And I loved the principles and the values, and I still do. And then, you know, I just, I became, lost my first election. I remember Conrad calling me and asking me to run for something, which I've forgotten now. And I'd lost it. And so, you know, the next year he called me back and he said, we want you to run for president. I think, oh my gosh. So I won that time, and then got involved with NACAC through the regional membership, and then went on to be president of NACAC, all with really Potomac Chesapeake roots, and they're still there.
Right. I think there are 4 of our Potomac Chesapeake members now who serve as president at national level. Is yourself and Joe Monty and Audrey Hill
And Jim Jump,
and Jim Jump.
and soon to be
And now
Esther.
Evelyn White will be the 5th.
Yes, yeah, Evelyn White. Yes,
That's great.
yeah.
What was going on in the way of significant issues in the profession and in particular within NACAC at the time you were in the leadership role there? What was really on the front burner in terms of issues at that time?
Political involvement. We felt the headquarters were in Skokie, Illinois, and had been in that from the beginning, because it was a group of Midwestern admissions officers who started. Well, and I think there was one counselor involved who started NACAC. And so it grew and grew and grew from there. But the headquarters were in Skokie, Illinois, and it had become very evident, especially to us here in the Washington area that NACAC was getting left out of the loop and was not part of the national dialogue. And so we wanted to move to Washington, to have the, move from Skokie to Washington. And when I was a delegate from Potomac and Chesapeake to NACAC, with, you know, our discussions at Potomac and Chesapeake, I got up and said and demanded that we move to Washington, or put a proposal, I made a motion. Lost that, of course, but then came up with a second motion, which we wanted a presence in Washington. And so we got a young man who became then our voice in Washington. And then when I was president, we actually passed going to Washington. And we moved to Washington. And then, of course, Gary, my husband, was the one who had to carry out. So he had to actually do the move.
Well, I noticed you and Joe and Gary talking a lot last night.
Yeah.
And Joe was very active in those early phases. And I had thought that the actual move happened on your watch, but it happened on Gary's.
The actual vote to move to Washington happened my year.
Okay.
Okay. But then it took, and we did some other things. We also had to change leadership because we did not have our executive manager did not, what is he called, executive officer, whatever. He did not agree with the decision to go to Washington. And so we had to let him go. And that was a process that Duty Meyer, who was the president between Gary and me, had to handle. And then, you know, just the moving of an office is not an easy thing to do. Mm-hmm. So my husband, Gary, was the right person for the right job at that time. So he actually did, you know, handle the move with the executive office. We had a new, Frank Burnett was hired as the new officer, executive officer, and he helped out. And what was her name? Oh, the woman who, I can't remember it right now, but she moved with the office. There was one woman who was the executive secretary who moved with the office, and she was our history for years.
I'm having the same blank that you are at the moment. I can see her.
Yes.
And
she
I
was.
Can't say her name.
She was fabulous.
This will be cut from the interview.
Yeah, right. All I can think of right now is Duty Meyer, and it wasn't Duty; it was another woman. But so we did it, and it's done, and I think it's made a huge difference for this association.
Right. We wouldn't be having speakers like Eric Hoover, as we did with us this morning, if we'd not gone to Washington.
We wouldn't be quoted in the Chronicle frequently. We wouldn't be part of the discussions between American Council of Education. They didn't even know who we were when we moved to Washington, the ACE, which really controls it all the educational dialogue. And now we're listened to, we testify before Congress, we are involved in major decisions. Mm-hmm. And you know, it's hard to...
Pell Grant funding, things like the DREAM Act.
Yes, yes.
You could look all across the education map
Mm-hmm.
and see places where we've been heard.
Yeah, and it's hard for me to accept the fact that it's a location issue, but it is a location issue. You know, you think because of the quality of our association that we would have been sought after for opinions before moving to Washington, but we weren't. So I'm glad we are now.
Well, in part that's because the initial focus in forming the organization in the first place was concerns with ethical practice.
Yes.
Rather than having a larger political impact.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, that's true.
That's one of the ways we've changed over time, I think. What do you see as some of the toughest challenges ahead for this organization to deal with at this particular point?
Couple of things. One, in this morning session, Eric Hoover mentioned Christopher, the boy who is on the streets in Washington, has no support from his family, and is getting no information about colleges. We need to do something to reach those students. We now live in Ashland, Virginia. We've met with the high school counselors in our area. They're getting no support from, or very little support from their, from the government, the Hanover government. In Columbus, Ohio, where we just moved from Columbus, Ohio, the counselors there do not have computers. They have no technological assistance. They have huge numbers of students that they have to deal with, and they have to deal with everything about those students, and they can't concentrate on college issues. And so I think somehow we have to help serve those students and help get information to those students, and forget about whether or not those counselors are members. Help them anyway, and find a way to help them, find a way to help those students. Go into churches and provide counseling in churches for students like that. Go into Boys and Girls Clubs. Go into wherever it takes. I know that we're a professional association, and the way that the rules are set up right now is that we service schools and colleges. Well, somehow students have to become more of the focus, I think, reaching students and reaching counselors, but that's another issue. Another thing I'm concerned about is that I didn't see very many deans of colleges here at this conference. And where are they? I think St. Mary's is here. Mary Washington's here. Washington College is here. Delaware. Who else?
I haven't tried to.
That's all I've
keep that
seen.
kind of a scorecard myself since I've been here. But
I've not seen. I haven't seen William & Mary. I haven't seen University of Virginia. And in the days when I was involved, all of the deans were here at this conference. So I think, and that may be happening more at NACAC now too, where the College Board, I think, has become the place where the deans go, and they send their subordinates to ACAC. And for training purposes, I think that absolutely the subordinates should be there. But the deans need to be here too. And so I think we need to find a way to reach them, to get them involved, to find out why they're not coming and do something about it. And then my third, the third thing I'm excited about is, well, there are a lot of other things, but is in answer to the question this morning that Eric brought up about Susie, what was it? Was it?
Goody Two Shoes.
Susie, yeah, Goody Two Shoes. I think that we need to expand our vision and expand our message, and that is, it doesn't matter whether Susie goes to Princeton or whether she goes to Podunk College. Who Susie becomes is up to Susie. And I think that as college counselors, we need to serve Susie in her growth and help her understand, this is the start of your journey, and your journey can take you anywhere you want it to take you. Maybe it will take you to an Ivy League school, but if it doesn't, that's okay. You've got a long life in which you can really do anything you want. You can shape your life any way you want it to be shaped. And the college, where you get into college is not the end of your life. You have many, many years ahead in which you can, you know, and I don't want to use the word be successful, because I think being successful is what you make of your life, regardless of whether you're CEO or whether you're working as a counselor in a school and getting underpaid.
I'm glad to see a focus returning, as it has already in this conference, to the value-added concept, because those of us who've been around for a while remember one of the first persons who wrote about that was Alden Thresher, who was Dean of Admissions at MIT many, many years ago.
Really? I don't know that.
He wrote a classic little book focusing on the fact that it's not important how you handicap the race in terms of the admissions process. What's important is what value is added to the student's experience during the 4 years wherever they are. And our good friend right now, Patrick O'Connor, another former NACAC president out in Michigan, yanks us back into reality with that every once in a while with his posts on the E-List. He had a wonderful one about 3 weeks ago about
really?
how it's not important where Sally got to go. What's important is that she is there.
Yes.
And that doesn't begin to capture his wisdom and humor in that story, but if you can find that, you need to read it.
Yeah. I have to do that.
Just to wrap up, can you look at one or two moments along the way that have probably given you more personal or professional satisfaction in terms of your work in the field?
Well, I begin with students. Every time I work with a student and a family, I get great pleasure out of that. And then the other thing is that the knowledge that I've gained through PCACAC and NACAC, and to a lesser extent College Board, but professional growth, and visiting colleges and knowing people like you have really helped me be able to bring to my students and my family the kind of knowledge about the whole process, which has not really changed that much. You know, in spite of all the talk today, you know, there are ups and downs, but there is a consistency that through my 40 years I've seen the whole time, in spite of all the ups and downs. And that, so being able to use that knowledge to help others is really brings me great joy.
So what you're saying is the foundation is still there, that we all began with, even though there have been new rooms built on the house for marketing and technology and so forth to go along with the basic counseling focus.
Yes, and I think, I mean, you know, I could go back and I could tell you so many stories about bumps in the road that we faced, and everyone says, oh my gosh, you know, it's got to be horrible. It's going to be horrible if we don't do it this way, if we don't do it that way. If those colleges, now they're doing this, they're paying to get students to come in, they're doing this, they're doing that. Well, you know, things just have a way of getting back into balance. And maybe it's because we are able to stand up and say, wait a minute, we don't like this. But I'd rather that we just sort of rise above the immediate issues that we don't agree with and look at a perspective that, you know, is broader. And I'd suggest that for the national discussions that are going on right now too. But
Pam Fay, thank you so
You're
much
welcome.
for sharing this time with us.
My
Really
pleasure.
appreciate it.
Good.